This is a video with a disturbing background. There was security footage at a church in Midlothian, Texas that showed an unknown individual that was roaming the building dressed in police tactical gear, and he was holding a hammer. It looked like he wasn't really trying to vandalize the church or steal anything. It looked like he was waiting for somebody. Like he was just trying to pass time. He in fact was waiting for somebody to arrive at the church. He ended up killing a woman named Missy Beavers, and she was a fitness instructor. She worked at this like fitness boot camp at her local church. And the day before, there was this weather broadcast saying how there's gonna be a massive storm the next day, specifically in the morning, and to keep a lookout. And that day, many people were like messaging her, calling her, saying if the class that morning was gonna be canceled because of the rainstorm. Yeah. It got to the point where like she ended up making a public post saying no excuses, we're gladiators, see you guys tomorrow, not knowing that that guy was inside building waiting for her and proceeds to beat her with the hammer. And then they thought they'd be able to capture whoever the fuck did this, because in the video the guy has like a specific limp and they walk with like their feet outwards like this, but still to this day nobody knows
who that mysterious killer is.
Yes, there's people saying how maybe
left abandoned by the people meant to love and protect her, Oksana Malea's childhood was nothing short of tragic. Oksana was only 3 years old when her alcoholic and neglectful parents left her outside in the cold, alone, unwanted, and barely noticed. With no one to care for her, she crawled into the only place she could find warmth and companionship, a kennel behind the house, where the family kept their dogs. For the next 5 years, the kennel was her home. The dogs, not her parents, became her family. She ate with them, slept with them, and learned to mimic their behavior to survive. By the time authorities discovered her in 1991, she was 8 years old, but hardly resembled a human child. She walked on all fours, barked instead of speaking, panted, growled, and even licked herself clean. She didn't respond to her name or human voices. She had been raised socially and emotionally as a dog. Rescue workers were horrified. Her case quickly became one of the most disturbing examples of feral child neglect ever documented. She was taken to a children's home for special care where years of patient work began. Slowly, she learned to speak and interact with people again, but the damage had already rooted deep. Decades of therapy helped her regain some basic social skills, but Oksana remained cognitively impaired. Her early development forever disrupted by the years spent isolated from humanity.
I say goodbye to my wife and kids and make the 3-hour trek to St. Paul to fight for our way of life, because day after day, it is under attack from Metro liberals.
A Minnesota state senator just arrested, accused of soliciting a minor for prostitution.
You really can't make this shit up. So this is Justin Eichhorn. He's a senator from Minnesota. And you heard that right. He was recently arrested during a sting operation because he was trying to purchase time with a minor for sex. So Justin had been speaking online to someone that he believed was a 16-year-old girl. But when he finally showed up to meet this young girl to rape her, because that's what it would have been, instead of finding a minor, Justin encountered a major problem. The authorities were there waiting for him to arrive, and they quickly arrested him. Now, this is incredibly significant because Justin is a senator, a lawmaker. And he was recently in the news because he was one of 5 co-authors of a bill that would officially designate Trump derangement syndrome as an officially recognized mental illness in Minnesota. Now, it isn't surprising to me that a politician has been caught in a pedophile sting. We already know that there are tons of politicians that are pedophiles. I've covered this issue extensively on all of my social media. But when you've recently been in the news for calling a large number of Americans deranged, your constituents, and then this happens, it's just not surprising. And thankfully, when you go to look up his information, he has resigned. And he's thankfully no longer a senator in Minnesota.
She was murdered just 2 days before her wedding, and then her groom's secret life was revealed. I've seen a lot of cases where guys live double lives, but honestly, this is the wildest one. It was the 25th of April 2018 in Monroe County, Missouri. Molly Watson was beaming. She was headed to the courthouse with her husband-to-be to get their marriage license. She couldn't wait for her big day. She was so excited to finally marry the love of her life, James Addy. Now, her love life hadn't always gone to plan, to be honest, so she was really excited to settle down once and for all. She'd been married previously, but sadly had to get a divorce. And during their breakup, she actually fell pregnant. Like, this was really not how she planned her life going. She then got romantically involved with a woman called Amber Brady, and the pair had been childhood friends. They went on to date for around 5 years. It seemed like they just really clicked, they were really compatible, but unfortunately something else came, another bump in the road. Molly met James, and he was a corrections officer, and she was attracted to him straight away. She knew this wasn't right, but she just couldn't keep away from James. And her relationship with Amber ended in tears when Amber caught the pair red-handed in a hotel room together. But in a way, Molly kind of felt like this did her a bit of a favour. She was able to just block Amber off everything and focus on her relationship with James. And the pair seemed really serious about each other, and James would eventually propose to her 7 years later. Now, this was a dream come true for Molly. She had always dreamed of having this Disney-themed wedding, and she couldn't wait to get planning. Finally, everything was falling into place. She'd got the colour scheme right. She'd actually picked out 2 wedding dresses because she loved 2 so much she couldn't pick between them. She got the flowers, she got the cake sorted. Everything was in motion. But she kind of had the blinkers on and was a little bit unaware of how James came across to everybody else. Her friends and family were all saying it. He seemed really disingenuous, and he wasn't even able to make proper eye contact with them. He seemed very unbothered about this wedding, like he could kind of take it or leave it. It really just seemed like there was something he wasn't telling them, and nobody could quite put their finger on it. But the dream wedding would never happen. In fact, Molly's friends and family would actually be attending her funeral instead. Even as the couple had gone to get their marriage license, the staff noticed that James was just a little bit off. He was quite evasive. He wouldn't really answer their questions correctly. And he just seemed like this dodgy character. Then 2 days later, a man called Glenn McSparron was driving home from his mum's house in the dark when something caught his eye. The area was pretty secluded, and he actually happened to only just be driving past there because it was kind of a shortcut. But he noticed a car pulled over, which was a little bit unusual, so he got out to approach the car to see if somebody needed help. That's when he noticed the body. He described his heart literally feeling like it stopped as he saw Molly's lifeless body lying on the floor. Now, he did not need to check her pulse. He could tell she was dead just from the look of her. He didn't need to even touch her and check. She had a gunshot wound to the head, and he immediately called 911. Police raced over there straight away, and they very quickly ruled out like a robbery gone wrong kind of situation because Molly had an expensive engagement ring on her finger. Someone could have taken that if they wanted to, but this was clearly more personal. With her wedding planned for just 2 days, the timing was very suspicious. That's when police discovered that James already had a wife. Now, he told Molly previously that yes, he had been married before, but his wife had died in a car accident. She was in fact very much still alive and still married to James. It was only after Molly's murder that his wife of 23 years found out he'd been dating Molly and engaged to her, and they'd been together 7 years. I have serious questions about this. Like, how on earth could somebody do this? Did he spend one night with the fiance, one night with the wife? Like, how did nobody catch on? Now, she obviously divorced him after finding this out and then testified against him in the murder trial. She said he definitely could have committed this murder. He was quite a selfish person, and he would almost just problem solve things as he went along in quite a heartless way. Although James maintains his innocence, a witness spotted him nearby to the crime scene, and tyre marks at the scene matched exactly to his vehicle. Police also found ammunition at his house which matched an empty box left at the crime scene. He was convicted of first-degree murder and given life in prison without the possibility of parole.
The Rosa de Guadalupe.
Yes.
This specific episode is a very disturbing episode, and I remember watching this episode.
What's it called?
Sales de baño, lo más oscuro. This kid, he's frantically moving, kind of looks like he's on some possession. He's just moving like, ah. And you see a bunch of doctors trying to restrain him, but they keep saying, yo, this kid is abnormally strong. They were telling the mom, there's something wrong with your kid, bro. This isn't normal. Did he take anything? And the mom is saying, no, he's a saint.
The mom's in denial.
The sister, she ends up finding something in his room. Little baggie with some white powder in it, and she's like, esto es cocaína.
Devil's dandruff.
And he's slowly becoming an addict.
How old is this kid?
How old is he in high school?
Then they find out that the shit that he's taking is cheaper than actual. He starts getting crazy, he starts burning up, and he has to take off his clothes. Him and his girlfriend go to a party and they take regular, and he goes back home and he's kind of like, what the fuck is this whack? I want the other stuff. Fast forward to another party. He wasn't taking the regular like everybody else. He was taking his own shit. And then this is where like shit just hit the fucking fan, bro. He starts taking his clothes off. The girlfriend's like, ooh, let me like get him a little more hot. Let me dance on him. But him, since he's tripping, he starts seeing her like evil.
Like she's a demon or something?
Like some trippy ass shit, bro. And then it just goes to him lunging at her and he starts eating her face.
Hey, this is a What Loop episode?
Yeah.
And I don't understand why he's the one who got the fucking win, the happy ending at the end.
You know what? They came to the conclusion what he was actually fucking doing, right? Bath salts.
Wasn't that an incident?
This man was shot and killed by his dog. Joseph Smith was a 30-year-old hunter known for his love of the outdoors. Early one January morning in 2023, he set out on what was supposed to be an ordinary hunting trip. Joseph and his trusted dog rode together in his pickup truck, and in the back seat, his hunting rifle sat loaded and ready. An oversight that would soon turn this peaceful morning into a nightmare. His dog, playful and restless, moved among the gear, and then, in a split second, tragedy struck. The dog's paw landed on the trigger. A deafening sound echoed through the truck as the rifle fired, sending a fatal shot into Joseph's back. The truck rolled to a stop, and the scene inside was a picture of absolute horror. Emergency responders arrived quickly, but it was too late. Joseph Smith, a young man with so much life ahead of him, was gone. This wasn't just a freak accident, it was a chilling reminder of how a single moment of carelessness with firearms can lead to an unimaginable loss. A loaded rifle, unsecured in the back seat, had turned a man's best friend into a killer. The dog, oblivious to what had happened, remained by his owner's side, loyal as ever. But the scars left by this tragic mistake will haunt everyone who knew Joseph. What should have been another day in the great outdoors became a chilling warning. Firearms demand respect, and one moment of inattention can shatter lives forever. If you guys want to see more animations like this, then go subscribe to my YouTube channel, SK22 Animations. Go over and hit that subscribe button just in case TikTok gets banned.
This pedophile committed a crime so disturbing that a petition was created that asked the government to publicly hang him. And the petition gathered thousands of signatures. This is 33-year-old Benjamin Taylor from West Virginia. And in 2016, he would commit one of the most sickening crimes I've ever read about. Back in 2016, Benjamin was living with his girlfriend, a woman named Amanda Adkins. At the time, Amanda had recently given birth only 9 months ago to her baby daughter, Emily. Emily was a beautiful young girl. And I want to warn you all right now, the details that we're about to discuss are some of the most disturbing I've ever covered. So in October of 2016, Benjamin had only been living with his girlfriend Amanda for about a month. And on the morning of Emily's death at around 4:30 a.m., Amanda woke up and went downstairs to search for her baby. When she went downstairs, she saw Benjamin Taylor with his pants unzipped sitting in the dark. Amanda then noticed that her 9-month-old daughter's limp body was lying nearby on a pile of sheets and laundry. Amanda screamed at Benjamin and grabbed her daughter's lifeless body, but he remained silent and stared at the ground. The details of what had just happened down there are disturbing. Local authorities would call this the worst assault that they had seen in decades. You see, Benjamin and Emily were covered in the infant's blood. After the child's body was examined, the authorities were able to determine that she had been assaulted by an adult male multiple times. The infant child was also bleeding extensively and had suffered head trauma. Emily had a fractured skull and brain hemorrhaging. Authorities believe that Emily may have been shaken violently, or even thrown to the ground or slammed against a hard object. When police arrived at the scene, Benjamin Taylor was observed trying to wipe something off of his groin. That was eventually determined to be Emily's blood. He also told authorities that he remembered taking the baby to the basement, but that he blacked out after that. You see, he had been smoking and drinking the night before, and that was his excuse. Thankfully, Benjamin was convicted of all charges and sentenced to life in prison without mercy, as you can see right here. But for some people, that just wasn't enough. And like I said at the beginning of this video, a petition was created which asked the government to publicly hang Benjamin. And this petition, before it was shut down, gathered over 50,000 signatures. I mean, this truly is one of the worst things that I've ever covered here on my TikTok. And personally, I don't think that life in prison is enough for this guy. I mean, the pain that poor Emily went through before she was eventually killed, is just heartbreaking on every single level. And I just hope and pray that the other prisoners that are in there with Benjamin find out or already have found out exactly what he did to land himself in there. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
Okay, genuinely, what would you do if you found out your stepdad had inappropriate photos of you on his computer? Well, this girl murdered him. She then rang her friend to ask for help moving the body. This case is a very, very wild ride. We're going to start way back in 1983 in Texas when Jade Jenks was born. And she actually had the same birthday as me, the 14th of October. Now, she grew up in a fairly normal household. The family didn't struggle for money, and she lived with her mum and her stepdad, Thomas Merriman. I suppose the only thing that wasn't really normal is that the mum and stepdad's relationship was very, very on and off. They would constantly split up, and they even filed for divorce a staggering 3 times. But Jade really got on with her stepdad. If anything, she was kind of closer to her stepdad than her own mum. When the pandemic broke out, obviously years and years later, Jade even moved next door to him, and they'd have food together most nights. He called her his full daughter. He just referred to her as my daughter, and she called him my dad. So Jade was understandably really concerned about her dad or her stepdad when he had a fall and he ended up in hospital. This was 2020. He had fallen at his home and got taken into hospital and was there for a little while. And she was almost feeling a bit powerless at this point as to what she could do to help. She decided probably one of the only things she could really do was to go round to his house and tidy it up a bit, give it a bit of a spring clean for when he actually got discharged. So as Thomas remained in Scripps Hospital in California, Jade headed to his house for a bit of a tidy up. And when she was there, she found something sickening. Thomas's computer was still plugged into the mains, and when she kind of moved the mouse to tidy things up a little bit, the screen came on and she saw something absolutely disturbing. It was a nude photo, and it was her. Now, she said she immediately felt totally sick and repulsed. She almost felt like she couldn't even touch her own skin. She decided to search through the computer to see what on earth was going on and found hundreds of more photos of herself. Now, these were all images that she had taken consensually with her ex-partners and had kept on her phone. She had no idea how her stepdad got hold of these. It was weeks later, New Year's Day 2021, when police got a call off a man named Adam. Now, he told them something pretty shocking. He said he was friends with Jade, they actually used to date, and he said Jade had potentially killed her stepdad and she'd apparently asked him to help move the body. He didn't know this for a fact, it wasn't confirmed, he'd not seen any dead body, but he obviously felt that the police needed to know. He said they had this conversation, he declined, and he left pretty sharpish. So police decided to head over to Thomas's house to try and validate this claim and do a welfare check for him. But when they pulled up to the house, they didn't see Thomas, they saw Jade pulling out in her car. She claimed she'd previously dropped Thomas at his house and hadn't seen him since. There seemed to be no sign of him anywhere. That was until they returned the following day. They found Thomas lay deceased in his driveway, and his body had been covered over with rubbish and he was wrapped in a blanket. So now police had a murder investigation on their hands, and suspiciously Jade stopped answering their questions. She was arrested and police began trawling through her mobile phone to try and find evidence. They found some very interesting text messages. She had contacted a guy on social media called Alan Roach and seemingly asked him if he would be able to help her sort a problem out. Although she tried to claim her innocence, texts really proved otherwise. He said he had taken some tablets of his own accord and then he'd been unable to walk. She said she got really concerned and kind of left him there for a bit, and then he passed away in her car. She said she panicked that she'd be blamed, so she tried to hide the body. However, her text messages told a totally different story. She'd text Alan stating, "I just dosed the hell out of him." Then said, "I can't carry him either back to my car or to his house. I'm not strong enough. Can you come like right now?" And hours later she texted, "He is waking up. I'm not sure how much longer I can control my temper." That was obviously very telling, but the text didn't stop there. She texted, "By the way, he's waking up and getting way more aggressive. He is super medicated. I can't keep a kicking body in my truck. I'm about ready to club him." She then said, "He is very aware and I am on my own." This obviously made it very clear that this Alan wasn't involved. He obviously was being texted about this, but he wasn't actually actively involved in this murder. Now, Jade had also been spotted on CCTV on her own on New Year's Eve going to a hardware shop, buying gloves, towels and a nylon cord. Prosecutors argued that Jade strangled her stepdad in her car after dosing him up before dumping his body. She was ultimately given 25 years in prison.
It usually takes a lot to disturb me, but I can fully say that what happened to this man is genuinely so horrifying and alarming that it really does keep me up at night. This is Otto Warmbier, and he was 22 years old when he mysteriously died after being detained for 17 months in North Korea. He went with a tour guide in a group to North Korea in 2015, and not long after he was detained for something he possibly didn't even do. No one knows exactly what happened to him while he was detained, but it resulted in him returning home in a vegetative state with severe brain trauma and a complete loss of brain tissue. He was now blind and deaf, and his middle row of bottom teeth looked like they had been completely rearranged with a pair of pliers. Doctors say they found no signs of torture, but I am not buying it. But one thing I know for sure is that what this man went through for 17 months before being returned to the US is sinister. So let's talk about it. Otto Warmbier was from Cincinnati, Ohio, and was described as incredibly smart, caring, and hardworking. He was an amazing athlete who graduated as the salutatorian of his high school class. Otto then went on to attend the University of Virginia, where he majored in commerce and economics. He had a lot of really good things going for him, one of which was he was about to go on a semester abroad in Hong Kong. This was really exciting for him, but before he did that, he wanted to go on a vacation, and he didn't know where until he stumbled across Young Pioneer Tours. Young Pioneer Tours is a travel company that specializes in international travel, but they have an unusual slogan. Their slogan is, quote, budget travel to destinations your mother would rather you stayed away from, end quote. After scrolling through their options, in December of 2015, Otto decided to sign up for a 5-day, 4-night tour to North Korea as part of a New Year's party. The tour group said that it was completely safe for US citizens, but the US State Department actually advised against it, and Otto's parents really didn't want him to go, as I'm sure we can all understand why. But this didn't stop Otto, and on December 29th, 2015, he, along with 10 other US citizens within the Young Pioneer Tours group, boarded a plane to Pyongyang. When they arrived to North Korea, Otto and all of the other members of the tour group had their cameras taken away, and all of their phones were searched for any harmful material that could potentially bring harm to the North Korean government. Everyone in the tour group stayed at this hotel, which is known as the Alcatraz of Fun. Otto roomed up with another group member, and everyone seemed to be having a lot of fun. But a few days later, everything would change. After a New Year's Eve party in Pyongyang's main square, the Young Pioneer Tours group went back to their hotel. Some went to the bars to continue drinking, while others just went back to their rooms. Otto's roommate went to a bowling alley, and he later recalled that no one had heard or seen Otto for about 2 hours that night. But at around 4:30 that morning, his roommate went back to their shared room and found Otto sleeping peacefully in his bed. So everything seemed okay. The next day, which was January 2nd, 2016, it was time to head home. So everyone in the group began boarding the plane, but out of nowhere, North Korean authorities walked up to Otto, tapped him on the shoulder, and started to take him away. Otto's roommate jokingly said, quote, well, we won't be seeing you again, end quote, in which Otto laughed. But little did he know that he was right. He, along with the rest of the tour group, would never see Otto again, and what happened after this has never been explained. After Otto had been taken away, and as the plane was about to take off, officials loudly announced, quote, Otto is very sick and has been taken to a hospital, end quote. At this point, everyone on the plane thought this was true, so they went back home, leaving Otto behind. When he didn't return home with the rest of the group, Otto's parents knew something was really wrong, but they had no idea what happened to him until late January when the North Korean government confirmed that he had been arrested. This was a shock to everyone, and the only thing North Korean authorities would say is that he was arrested for committing a hostile act against the state. It would take 6 weeks for any more information to come out, and in this time frame, his family and friends back home were in a state of panic, as I'm sure you can imagine. North Korea then went into detail, accusing Otto of stealing a propaganda poster from a restricted area of his hotel at around 2 a.m. on New Year's Day. 1 month later, Otto appeared on TV at a press conference, and it is one of the most jarring things I have ever seen.
I entirely beg you, people and government of the DPR Korea, for your forgiveness. Please, I have made the worst mistake of my life.
He was very obviously under a lot of stress, but he was crying, looked incredibly pale, and was just very distressed. He then made a speech that shocked everyone. Reading from a script, Otto thanked the North Korean government, quote, for the opportunity to apologize for my crime, to beg for forgiveness, and to beg for any assistance to save my life, end quote. He then confessed. He said he snuck onto the employee-only restricted floor of his hotel and tried to steal the propaganda poster as a trophy for a Methodist church back home, and for the Z Society, which is a secret society at the University of Virginia that he wanted to join. He said that both were allies to the CIA. Otto said he wanted to do this to harm the work ethic and motivation of the Korean people. But this is where the story starts to get really strange and unnerving. Many people think that this confession Otto made was fake and then he was forced to lie and say that he did this when he didn't. There were a lot of inconsistencies in his statement, and overall it just really didn't sound like his words. One reason that people thought that this was a fake confession was because Otto was Jewish and he had no affiliation with a Methodist church at all. Everyone back home hoped that they would show mercy on Otto, but that was not the case. 2 months after he was arrested, a trial started, and it only lasted 1 hour. During the trial, North Korean authorities presented CCTV footage taken from the hotel the night the poster was stolen, and even though the image is incredibly grainy and you aren't really able to see a face, they claim this was Otto. This was backed up by Otto's tour guide, who claimed Otto was, in his opinion, definitely the one on the CCTV footage. This, along with his confession, even though some think that it was forced, fingerprint evidence, and witness testimony, Otto was found guilty by the North Korean government. You can see his utter shock at this finding, and he was then sentenced to 15 years of imprisonment and hard labor. This sentence shocked everyone at home, who found it outrageous, and US authorities felt like this was a political move. But in North Korea, damaging or stealing any item with the name or image of a North Korean leader is considered a serious crime. So Otto was now sentenced, and while everyone thought he would now be spending his days in a labor camp, authorities back home were doing everything they could to get him released. It would take over a year, but 17 months later, Otto was officially released and got to go back home to Ohio. And you would think that this would be a happy moment for his family, right? Well, after seeing Otto's condition, that was not the case. According to his family, Otto was wheeled off the plane strapped down in a bed. He was violently jerking and making these really scary howling and inhumane sounds. His head had been shaved and he was now blind and deaf. And he had a huge scar that resembled electrocution on his left foot. If this wasn't disturbing enough, after further examination, it looked like someone had taken a pair of pliers and rearranged his middle bottom row of teeth. The dentist Otto had his entire life confirmed this. His dentist said that Otto always had incredibly straight teeth, but now his bottom 4 middle teeth had been moved backwards toward his tongue, and on top of that, he was just completely missing a tooth. After being taken to a local hospital, Otto was found to be in a vegetative state, and he had been in a coma for the past 17 months. This was shocking news to his family and to US authorities, because not once had anyone in North Korea mentioned that Otto was sick and in a coma. Everyone here thought that for the past 17 months, he had been serving his time in prison and working in labor camps like he was sentenced. But that was not true. He had severe brain trauma and was in what doctors called a state of unresponsive wakefulness. He would occasionally open his eyes and blink, but other than that, he showed no awareness of his environment, and he couldn't intentionally move. He couldn't even recognize his own language. Otto's doctors here in the US received brain scans that were taken in North Korea, and those showed severe damage to his brain. But what caused that damage is still a mystery. According to North Korean authorities and medical staff, Otto had somehow suffered a brain injury and was comatose since the day after his trial in 2016. And due to his state now, it seemed clear to some people that he had been tortured, but North Korea denies this. They say that Otto contracted botulism after his trial, and he fell into a coma after taking a sleeping pill that they gave him. This kind of contradicts everything that had happened. When Otto was taken off the plane, well before he was tried and convicted, North Korean officials told everyone that he was sick when he wasn't, at least not yet. And if this was true, why didn't they say anything sooner? Here is what's strange though. Otto was examined by a doctor once home, and according to them, they found no signs of torture on his body. They say that he fell into a coma after suffering from a lack of blood and oxygen to his brain. How that happened and why, they don't know. But he was denied oxygen for anywhere between 5 and 20 minutes. They did note that his condition was severe and that he suffered an extensive loss of tissue in all regions of his brain. But still, doctors remain adamant that there was no sign of torture, even despite his teeth and huge scar on his foot that resembled electrocution. Doctors found no signs of fractures to his skull or even previous ones that had possibly healed, and scans to his head and neck seemed normal outside of his brain injury. Some doctors suggest that despite Otto returning in this condition, he received good medical care while in North Korea. Sadly, Otto's injuries were so severe that he never regained consciousness, and 1 week after returning home, he died, never getting to tell his side of the story. For reasons unknown, his family requested no autopsy, but a post-mortem examination was done, and from that, the medical examiner said that his cause of death could have been from a blood clot, sepsis, or kidney failure, and if he did have botulism like North Korea said, then a sleeping pill pill could have caused him to stop breathing if he had been paralyzed from the illness. But another strange twist is that after being examined by a doctor back home, they found no evidence of the botulism illness in Otto's body. This could be due to how long he was detained in North Korea, but it could also mean that he never actually had botulism like they said. The medical examiner officially ruled his manner of death as undetermined and said, quote, "We don't know what happened to him, and that's the bottom line." End quote. So while we still don't know what exactly happened to Otto, there are a few theories. One being that he was tortured, and this theory was backed up when another US prisoner who was also detained at the same time as Otto came forward in 2019. According to him, he saw an American man who he thought was Otto fainting and being dragged across a hallway by North Korean authorities. He said this man's face and head was covered in water, and this has led many people to question if Otto suffered from water torture. This other prisoner also claimed to have suffered from water torture himself at the hands of the North Korean government, so this could be a real possibility. Some think Otto was framed and was truly innocent, while others think that he was guilty for committing the crime that he was sentenced for. Others think that Otto could have attempted to end his own life after being found guilty, but failed, which resulted in the brain injury and coma. North Korea has denied any wrongdoing, and they denied that Otto was ever abused, and they feel that Otto's death was used as a smear campaign against their government. In 2018, Otto's parents filed a lawsuit in the hopes that North Korea would be found responsible for torturing Otto, leading to his death. And the North Korean government was actually found legally liable for his torture and death, even though they still deny it. What's crazy is the fact that Young Pioneer Tours is still around and is still a thing, but after Otto's death, they changed their policy and now don't accept US citizens on their tours. But it's now been 9 years, and whatever happened to Otto on that trip remains a mystery.
Hammer coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
That 70s show actor Danny Masterson has got 30 years in prison for R-ing women. Most allegations against Danny came to light in March 2017. It was confirmed that an investigation had begun into SA involving the actor. Danny was removed from the Netflix show The Ranch and was dropped by his talent agency. He was charged in 2020 with forcibly R-ing 3 women in separate incidents between 2001 and 2003. He pleaded not guilty to 3 charges in January 2021. All of the crimes are believed to have taken place in his home. He was initially tried for the allegations in late 2022, but this was a mistrial and he was retried. He's now been found guilty and has been sentenced to 30 years to life.
So another body has been found in Lady Bird Lake. This is now the 4th man aged 30 to 40 pulled from the lake this year. And many people are claiming they can see patterns in the men being found in the lake, causing people to wonder if it's a serial killer. I just did a podcast episode breaking this all down, but here's some of what we know. So in 2018, these men were 3 of the 6 bodies recovered from bodies of water in downtown Austin. The police ruled that there was no foul play, but all 3 men were seen in the 2 popular bar areas in Austin, 6th Street and Rainey. And in an article from 2019, ER doctors were saying that they were seeing a lot of people coming in after being drugged in these 2 neighborhoods. And as of now, we know that 3 of the 4 men who died in Lady Bird Lake this year were seen in those 2 neighborhoods the night before. The other one is still inconclusive. If you have any information, you can contact the Austin Police Department, and if you know anyone in Austin or anyone traveling to Austin, you can let them know what's going on so that everyone can look out for each other.
Can you imagine living with someone that you know is trying to end your life? This hidden camera captures a moment this woman puts bleach inside her husband's coffee maker multiple times a day. This is Robbie Johnson, and he began setting up cameras all around his house when he started to notice that his coffee was tasting a little off. He wasn't really expecting to catch anything, but when he looked back at the footage, he was shocked. His wife Melody is seen pouring a substance inside his coffee maker every single day before he brewed the coffee. Robbie got testing strips, and each time it tested positive for chlorine. At this time, Robbie and Melody were in the process of a divorce, but they were still living together. Robbie pretended to drink his coffee every morning and continued to gather evidence so that he can go to police. But when he showed police all this footage, they said that they couldn't see exactly what Melody was pouring into the coffee maker, so he couldn't prove it. So Robbie had to set up even more cameras around the house with different angles so that it can prove that Melody was in fact poisoning him. Melody was charged with attempted murder, and I bet this guy will never let anyone else make him a coffee again.
More information has been released recently about the killing of 4 university students at the University of Idaho, but the killer is still at large. On Sunday morning, 4 students were found stabbed to death in their beds near campus. 2 other roommates were at home at the time upstairs, but both were unharmed. It's believed that their deaths occurred around 3 or 4 in the morning, though the 911 call was not placed until the following day. It's also now believed that they were asleep at the time of the attack. Initially, police believed that there was no further threat to the community, but they have since backtracked that. And as of now, they're looking for a K-Bar brand combat blade that they think was used in the attack. A live stream from a food truck actually shows Madison and Kaylee ordering food hours before the attack happened. In the video, this man can actually be seen behind the girls, walking around and looking at them, leading many internet sleuths to believe that he was somehow involved, but he has since been cleared by the police. Police have also released this updated timeline of events showing that Xana and Ethan were at a party and Maddie and Kaylee were getting food that night. A lot of this information has actually been uncovered by Kaylee's sister, who's taken a lot of the investigation into her own hands. And one thing that she wants people to know is that Kaylee called her ex-boyfriend 6 times that night, an hour before the attack happened. Right now, we don't know if that means anything, but it is something that she wanted out there. Classes have not been canceled on campus, but if you choose to not go, you will not be penalized. And if anyone has any tips or information on this case, you can call a tip line at 208-883-7180.
This is the Pitbull video, one of the hardest cartel execution videos to watch explained. The video that I'm about to explain is extremely graphic and I don't recommend searching for it. The video begins with a man lying on his back on the ground, and 2 men are holding his legs open. He's being restrained. And in total, there is 5 perpetrators and 1 victim. And also 2 pit bull dogs. Apparently, this is the victim's punishment for allegedly doing something with a kid or to a kid. The victim is naked, and at the start of the video, the dog has done most of the work. The dog already ripped off the man's privates, and it's just a bloody mess. The dog continues to rip pieces of flesh off of where his privates used to be, and the victim is being held down, and he is also gagged so he can't scream. But sometimes the gag came loose, and at this point you could hear the man scream in pain. The victim was even talking, but I couldn't translate it, but that means he was completely conscious during this. Which I can't even imagine the pain. As a man, this might be one of the worst videos out there. Funky Town is bad, Ghost Rider is bad, but as a man, I can't imagine anything more painful than a pit bull ripping off your junk while you're still alive. Not many people mention this video with the other disturbing ones, but it's definitely up there. There's not any information about the victim after the video. I don't know if he died, but it's safe to assume he did. He lost a lot of blood, and if a dog eats your privates, you will most likely get an infection and die from it. All in all, this video is very graphic, very real, and very disturbing. Please do yourself a favor and never go searching for this video, especially if you're a man. We all know about a school shooting, but have you ever heard about a school stabbing? On October 22nd, 2015, 21-year-old Anton London Peterson walked into a high school in Trollhättan, Sweden with a sword and killed 3 people and injured another. Peterson entered the school at 10:06 a.m. wearing black clothing, a cape, a German World War II helmet, and a paintball mask that resembled Darth Vader. And at first, many people believed Peterson was just doing a Halloween prank dressed up as Darth Vader. But when 20-year-old teaching assistant Lavin Eskandar confronted Peterson, Peterson immediately stabbed him with a sword and Eskandar died at the scene. Peterson then stabbed 15-year-old student Hamed Hassan, who died from his injuries later in the hospital. Peterson then stabbed another 15-year-old unnamed student who survived his injuries. And while Peterson was wandering through the halls of the school, 2 students encountered him, and believing his presence was a Halloween prank, they posed with him and took a picture. And this is that picture right here. And according to authorities, Peterson spared these 2 boys because they had white skin. Shortly after this, 42-year-old teacher Nazir Hamso confronted Peterson and demanded he remove the mask. Peterson then charged at him and stabbed him in the abdomen. He then died 6 weeks later in the hospital on December 3rd. Shortly before 10:16 a.m., police officers arrived at the scene, only 10 minutes after Peterson arrived at the school. Peterson reportedly charged at the police and he was shot in the abdomen, later dying from his injuries in the hospital. It was also revealed that before Peterson killed any of his victims, he always shouted, "I am your father." This is the deadliest attack on a school in Swedish history and also the first deadly attack on a school in Sweden since 1961. This is a crazy case and not many people know about it. So if you want a part 2 with more information, just let me know and I'll make it.
This is a shocking moment. 19-year-old Chelsea Standage ignored the pleas of her friends and boyfriend to slow down as she was driving through the streets of Horbury in West Yorkshire at up to 80 miles an hour. Just a quick warning, viewer discretion is advised.
Oh my god!
It was the early hours of November 13th, 2021, and Chelsea had been drinking with friends. She was then met by her boyfriend Elliot, and when they all climbed into Chelsea's Vauxhall Corsa, she was almost 2 times the drink drive limit. Chelsea started driving faster and faster, and as her friends and boyfriend told her to slow down, she laughed and ignored them. She reached almost 80 miles an hour going through the residential streets of Horbury, and as she was going downhill, she clipped a car and ploughed straight into a wall, crushing the passenger side of the car where Elliot was sitting. Elliot didn't stand a chance of survival. Part of his spine was missing in the wreckage. His rib cage had shattered and pierced his vital organs, leaving only his heart intact. Elliot's mum had to go and identify his body, and she said, quote, "I was begging and begging him to wake up. If I could have put my breath into him to give him my life, I would have done it in a heartbeat. I wanted to swap places with him. When I held his hand and realised he wasn't waking up, I just dropped to the ground." Following Elliot's death, his family's grief was actually made worse by seeing photos and videos of Chelsea out clubbing and drinking while awaiting her trial. They were also absolutely furious that she was allowed to continue driving up until her court date. Chelsea admitted causing death by dangerous driving, as well as 2 counts of causing serious injury by dangerous driving to her 2 other passengers. She was sentenced to 8 years and 8 months in prison, but she'll be considered for release after serving just 2/3 of that sentence.
The Funky Town Killers might have another video, and I'm about to explain it. The video begins in a well-lit white room with white tiles on the floor. The tiles look extremely identical to the ones in Funky Town. In the opening seconds of the video, one of the killers is holding up a still beating heart to the camera, and while this is happening, you can hear the cameraman laughing hysterically. And you then realize there are multiple cartel members in the room and there are 2 dead guys lying on the ground. After the opening seconds, the camera goes to one of the victims' corpses on the ground, and since there are 2 dead victims with their hearts ripped out of their bodies, there is literally blood everywhere. The camera then stays on one of the victims' bodies, and one of the cartel members then starts to behead him. And once the beheading was completed, the cartel members began to play soccer with the victim's head. The cameraman gets involved, and they all begin kicking the head around, having fun. They are laughing, cracking jokes, and it's absolutely sickening. Every time the head is kicked around, you see the blood trail it leaves behind on the white tiled floor. After this, they then pose with the head and hold it up to the camera. The camera then pans to the other victim's body on the floor, and you can see another cartel member dismembering the victim's arm. You see him slicing away with a knife. The camera then goes back to the other victim's body, and you can see that they removed one of his arms, and at this point, one of the cartel members gets down on his knees and begins having an arm wrestle with the severed arm of the victim, just laughing. It's absolutely horrible and disturbing, and the video then concludes. Now, the video doesn't show the killings, but it's safe to assume they were carried out shortly before the video was recorded, since at the beginning of the video there was a beating heart. Now, not only is the brutal nature of the video terrifying, but also the setting of it. The setting looks exactly like the setting of the infamous video Funky Town. And many people who saw both videos are convinced it's the same room Funky Town was done in. But nothing at this point is 100% confirmed. But assuming from the gruesome nature of the video and the white tiles, I do believe this was the same room Funky Town was done in. This video is extremely disturbing, and the cartel members laughing, having a good time, while kicking the victim's head around is just something you don't want to see. Please never go searching for this video because you will regret it.
Imagine you're sat out on your sun deck near the water having an evening drink when you suddenly hear a child's voice in the distance screaming help from the water. That's exactly what happened on May 23rd, 2009 in Portland, Oregon. Patty and Dan Gallagher were on the deck of their waterside condo enjoying a drink when they heard something hit the water, followed by a child's voice screaming, "Help me." There wasn't much light on the water, so Dan shouted, "Where are you?" while Patty dialed 911 and told the operator that someone had fallen from the bridge over the Willamette River. By now, other people had heard the screams, and a couple that lived on a floating home on the water motored their boat and set out to find where the voice was coming from. 25 minutes went by when finally Cheryl and David spotted the young girl in the water. Cheryl jumped in, and as she was swimming back with the girl, she heard David shout, "Oh my God, there's another one." David immediately jumped in the water and grabbed the young boy, only he was silent. He'd been face down in the water for 30 minutes by this point, and although CPR was administered, it was already too late for 4-year-old Eldon. His sister, 7-year-old Trinity, was rushed to hospital, and the police launched a homicide investigation. They had no idea who these children were or how they'd come to be in the water. Meanwhile, 2 miles down the river in Milwaukee, Eldon and Trinity's older brother Gavin was at home in bed. He'd decided to stay at home with his grandparents while his mother went to pick up Eldon and Trinity. Only he woke up at 1 a.m. and realised that they weren't home, so he woke his grandparents and they tried to call his mother Amanda. They couldn't get hold of her, so they decided to ring Eldon and Trinity's dad, Jason. He told them that Amanda had been round at 8 p.m. and picked the children up. Jason checked his phone and realised that he'd had a missed call from Amanda at 1:22 a.m. He tried to phone her back, and it was an hour and a half before he got through. She answered and said, "Help me." Jason asked where the children were, but Amanda wouldn't tell him, so he phoned the police and said that he thought his 2 children were in danger. He had absolutely no idea that his 4-year-old son Eldon was already dead. Around 7 a.m, Amanda's sister saw on the news that 2 children had been found in the river. Jason was informed, and he phoned the police and told them that he thought the 2 children in the river might be his. He was then told that his son was dead and his daughter was in a critical condition in hospital. By now, police were out looking for Amanda, and they found her on the 9th floor of a multi-storey car park. When she saw the police, she ran and tried to jump over the side, but they grabbed her just in time and she was detained. Amanda admitted to throwing her children over the bridge, saying that she did it to hurt Jason. Amanda was charged with aggravated murder and attempted aggravated murder and sentenced to life with a minimum of 35 years. On Sunday, the 4th of June 2023, Amanda was found dead in her cell. Her cause of death has not been released.
Over 80 bodies have been found in this park over the years. Welcome to Leakin Park in Baltimore, the scariest place in America. So if you've never heard of Leakin Park, this place is famous. It's in the heart of Baltimore, bordered by some of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the city. And this place has been a notorious body dumping ground for years. There have been all sorts of victims of all different sorts of crimes that have happened here. One thing that happens regularly in the park is the dumping of bodies of animals. Now, I've been to the park and I've actually found a couple of dead dogs wrapped up in garbage bags. It's really sad, but the history only gets worse from there. There are a lot of hotspots in Leakin Park where people love to dump bodies, but one right here is nicknamed the Devil's Well. Only a few years ago in 2018, a man was brutally murdered right here. His body was set on fire and it was then dumped down this well. To this day, nobody has ever been arrested in connection to this murder. There was also the murder of Hae-Min Lee, whose body was found dumped here. She was the subject of the podcast Serial. But it's not just single murders that have happened here. Serial killers have operated inside of this park, including this man, Reginald Vernon Oates. Decades ago, he was found wandering through the park where he had buried 4 young boys in shallow graves. He was carrying a lunchbox with pieces of the boys inside of it. There's also Lemuel Wallace, who was murdered inside of the park's restroom. A local pastor from Baltimore was actually convicted of hiring a hitman to bring Lemuel out there so that he would be brutally murdered so the pastor could collect life insurance money from him. And this is just a sample of the murders that have happened here. I'm talking 80 different confirmed bodies that have been discovered there. A friend of mine named Dan Bell, who's done a great video series of documentaries on this park, actually found a human skull fragment inside of the park just a few years ago. He called it into the police. He had just been walking through the woods when he came across it, and it ended up being the skull of someone who had taken their own life. There's actually a site dedicated to mapping out where all of the bodies in Leakin Park have been found. As you can see, these are all red dots where corpses have been recovered, and this is only a fraction of the stories. There was a serial killer who brought a woman to Leakin Park to murder her. He cut off her ears, but she eventually fought him off and escaped. There's obviously tons of gang violence and bodies that are just dumped. And on a specific road right here named Winterbourne Avenue, a serial killer has dumped multiple bodies. Winterbourne is the last remaining road that actually goes through Leakin Park. I forgot to mention this at the beginning. Years ago, the city actually closed off most of the inroads that led through Leakin Park because so many bodies were being dumped there. I actually filmed a whole documentary about Leakin Park. It's 2.5 hours long. We visited so many of the sites where these bodies had been dumped. We interviewed a bunch of people who had experiences there. And we went there 3 different times throughout a year to try and investigate if this place was haunted or not. And let me tell you, it was one of the craziest videos I've ever filmed in my life. And the stories of this park are so twisted, so dark. Mafia dumping grounds, so many unsolved murders. If you want to watch the full documentary, it's on my YouTube now. The link is in my bio. But warning, it is disturbing.
What? Nothing there, mate. Look at that. What? Look at there.
This is the unlikely reason that a trip to Taco Bell ended in murder. It was 2003 in Illinois. Sarah Kolb and Corey Gregory met after being enrolled in a GED program together. They quickly became inseparable as friends. However, Corey was known to have grown romantic feelings for Sarah, but unfortunately for Corey, Sarah was a lesbian and did not feel the same way about him. Sarah was known for being an alpha female in her friendship circle, and she started hanging out with a group called the Juggalos, who I found out are fans of the hip-hop group Insane Clown Posse. The group is stereotyped as being violent and crime committing, and in 2011, the FBI would go on to officially label them as a gang. In November 2004, a girl called Adrienne Reynolds moved to East Moline to live with her dad. She was enrolled in the same program as Sarah and Corey and quickly caught Sarah's eye. It's reported that Sarah made her feelings known for Adrienne and the pair began flirting. This went on for a matter of weeks, with the pair writing romantic letters to each other when they eventually decided to meet out of school. The pair ended up going to a party together, and it's believed that Sarah had expectations of how the relationship was going to develop, but it actually all ended up going horribly wrong. She was blindsided when Adrienne left the party and returned a few hours later. Adrienne told Sarah that she had slept with 2 guys. At this point, Sarah decided to cut things off with Adrienne, but Adrienne wanted the relationship to continue. She wasn't ready to go down without a fight. Over a period of 2 months, Adrienne relentlessly pursued Sarah for another chance. Sarah actually even ended up making threats to Adrienne if she didn't leave her alone. Now, Adrienne at this point decided to develop a relationship with Corey, and she started writing letters to him. Ultimately, Sarah ended up finding out about these letters to Corey, and she was enraged. On the 21st of January 2005, Sarah invited Adrienne for lunch. Adrienne was pleased, under the impression that they could all maybe finally get along. Unfortunately, she couldn't have been more wrong. After meeting up at Taco Bell, Sarah confronted Adrienne about writing the letters to Corey. A huge fight broke out in the car park of the restaurant. Corey ended up intervening, and he actually held Adrienne down while Sarah strangled her to death. The pair then took Adrienne's body to Sarah's grandparents' farm, where they tried to burn her with petrol. When that failed, they called a friend of theirs, 16-year-old Nathan, to come and help them. He used his granddad's handsaw to dismember her body and put her body parts in a bin bag. The trio then disposed of her remains at Black Hawk Historical Site in Rock Island. Adrienne's parents started to get really worried when she didn't turn up for work, and they reported her missing. Her remains were discovered by police on the 26th of January. Sarah and Corey were charged as adults with 2 counts of first-degree murder and concealment of homicide. Nathan was also charged with concealment of a homicide. Sarah was found guilty and was sentenced to 53 years in prison. Corey was sentenced to 45 years in prison after pleading guilty. Nathan was given a juvenile sentence of 5 years, and he actually died a few years after his release in a car accident. This schoolboy stabbed his teacher to death in front of a classroom full of students. 61-year-old Anne Maguire was a Spanish teacher teaching in Leeds. She'd actually worked at the school for 40 years and she was only 5 months off retirement. However, in April 2014, something absolutely horrific happened. One of her students was 15-year-old Will Cornick. He'd always been described as a smart student who never really caused any trouble. Classmates regarded him as a polite student, but after he got diagnosed with diabetes, his personality seemed to change. In 2013, he tried to join the army, but because of his diagnosis, he was rejected. Being in the army had been his dream, so this was really upsetting for him. After failing to complete his Spanish homework, he was given detention by Anne. He also expressed a wish to her that he wanted to drop Spanish, but she wouldn't let him, which only angered him more. He began to develop a deep-rooted grudge against Anne. Shockingly, he reportedly messaged his friends on Facebook asking if one of them would kill her for him for £10. During one school day, halfway through his Spanish class, Will decided to get up and attack Anne with a knife. The classmates watched on in horror as he chased her out of the classroom. When there, another teacher heard her screams and tried to shield Anne from any more blows from him. Will then allegedly returned to his class and told his classmates how it was a shame that he hadn't killed her. However, Anne did actually pass away from her injuries. Will later admitted that he did plan also to kill 2 other teachers. One of them was actually pregnant at the time. He's been sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 20 years. This mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house, and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong, as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved. This is the disturbing case of the child who killed a child. In July 2018, 6-year-old Alicia McPhail was abducted from her bed. She'd been staying with her grandparents in the Isle of Bute. She'd gone to sleep watching Peppa Pig, and no one had any idea of the horrors that would unfold that evening. Meanwhile, 16-year-old Aaron Campbell was drinking with friends at his house. Aaron apparently became upset in the night because he had been arguing with his mum. He had had a challenging upbringing involving physical and emotional abuse. Aaron decided that evening he wanted to get some substances to smoke from a couple that he knew. The couple in question were Alicia's dad, Robert, and his girlfriend. They'd been known to sell substances to Aaron previously, but he could not get hold of them. Intending to go and steal them off them, Aaron armed himself with a knife. He headed to Robert's house where he lived with his parents and girlfriend. This was obviously where Alicia was staying that evening. When he arrived at the house, he noticed the 6-year-old sleeping in her bed and took the opportunity to snatch the poor defenseless young child. Disgustingly, he carried her to a secluded location, SA'd her, and then killed her. He then disposed of his clothes in the sea. At 6 a.m. the next day, Alicia's grandparents woke up to discover that the little girl was missing. They straight away alerted police and locals. When the family asked Aaron to keep an eye out for the little girl, he texted them back saying, "Oh damn, I'm sure she's not went too far." A local man soon discovered Alicia's lifeless body around 15 minutes away from her house. Along with a lot of the local community, Aaron's mum actually checked her CCTV of her house. She was hoping that this would help with the investigation, and it definitely did. She saw her son leaving and returning from the house that night, and she handed the evidence over to police. Aaron was arrested, and it was discovered that the clothes that he'd abandoned on the beach did actually match with his DNA. This case made me terrified to go to the cinema. This is the case of the horror in Screen 9. James Holmes was raised in California. His mum was a nurse and his dad was a scientist. From a young age, he was experiencing night terrors and allegedly actually tried to take his own life when he was just 11 years old. He was apparently obsessed with guns and weapons and had dreamed of becoming a mass murderer. Between May and July 2012, he legally bought 4 guns. Background checks were conducted and he was allowed the weapons. He also bought spike strips, which, if you don't know, pop the tyres of cars if they chase after you. On July the 19th, just hours before tragedy would unfold, James mailed his notebook to his psychiatrist. Inside the notebook, James detailed his plans to kill. The notebook was actually discovered later on undelivered. Just prior to entering a cinema in Aurora, James rang a crisis line to tell them about his plans to kill. However, the call was disconnected after just 9 seconds. At the midnight showing of The Dark Knight Rises, CCTV captures James walking into the cinema. He walks into Screen 9, props open the door, and then walks back out again. Shockingly, he goes to his car and gets guns out and gas canisters. He re-entered the screen at about 12:38 PM and set off 2 gas canisters. When he entered Screen 9 again, he immediately opens fire on the audience, instantly killing 10 people. 2 others later died in hospital from their injuries. An additional 70 people were injured. This was an absolutely packed out cinema. James also shot at people as they scrambled to exit the screen. His youngest victim was a 6-year-old girl. Witnesses said this all unfolded as there was actually a gunfight on the screen, and initially they all thought it was special effects and just part of the film. Police were actually on the scene very quickly after the first 911 call. James surrendered to the police and was arrested in the car park. He was apparently very calm when he was arrested and told police that he had booby-trapped his apartment. When police investigated his apartment, this was found out to be true. He was sentenced to 12 consecutive life sentences.